When I met her, she looked like trouble in the best way. Sharp eyes, quick laugh, the kind of girl everyone watches when she walks into a room. She noticed that too, and she liked it. From the start, I knew she had an edge, but I told myself that was just confidence. It wasn't. It was cruelty dressed up as charm, and I learned that the hard way. On our second date, she made a joke about how men are replaceable and looked straight at me while she said it. I laughed along, trying to show I wasn't fragile. She smirked like she won a round in a game I didn't know we were playing. That was the rhythm of us from the beginning. Me trying to keep things light, her testing how far she could push. She liked to brag about her exes, not in a nostalgic way, but as if she was still competing with them. She'd say things like, "One guy used to fly me out just to see me for a night. What do you bring to the table?" Half a joke, half a challenge. And when I actually did something thoughtful, cooked dinner, planned a weekend away, she'd shrug and call it cute, like I was a kid bringing her a drawing for fridge. Arguments were never fair. If I caught her texting some guy late, she'd flip it back on me. "You're paranoid," she'd say. If I asked why she disappeared for 2 days, she'd snap that I was suffocating her. If I stayed quiet, she'd accuse me of being distant. There was no right move. She had a way of twisting my words so fast that by the end of every fight, I was the one apologizing. Even when I walked in with proof, she'd cross a line. She loved showing off in public, holding my hand a little too tight at parties, laughing too loud, whispering in my ear just to see other guys watching. But as soon as the door closed, the affection shut off. She'd sit scrolling on her phone for hours, ignoring me. If I asked what was wrong, she'd roll her eyes and say, "God, you're needy." If I didn't ask, she'd accuse me of not caring. It was like living in a maze with no exit. Money was another trap. She made it clear she hated paying for anything, said it ruined the mood. I didn't mind covering dinners, but it didn't stop there. Clothes, rides, even her phone bill once. If I hesitated, she'd sneer. A real man wouldn't make me ask twice. And when I finally said I wasn't comfortable always paying, she laughed in my face and told me I should date someone on my level. The worst part wasn't even the money or the games. It was how she made me doubt myself. She'd tell me I was boring, then a week later say she loved how stable I was. She'd say I didn't pay enough attention, then the next day say I was too intense. Every compliment had an insult tied to it. Every bit of love was a leash. And I kept chasing the moments when she was soft, when she'd curl into me on the couch and say she felt safe with me. Those were rare, but they were enough to keep me hooked. I knew something was wrong the night I got sick. Fever, chills, couldn't get out of bed. I asked if she could bring me soup. She looked at me and said, "You're not dying. Stop acting pathetic." Then she went out with her friends and posted selfies all night while I lay there sweating through my sheets. That's when it hit me. She didn't care about me. She cared about the control. She liked having someone reliable to kick around when she was bored. I still didn't leave right away. That's the part one hate admitting. I stayed because I thought maybe if I just held on, she'd come back around to the girl she was at the start. But the truth is, that girl wasn't real. She was a mask she put on to reel me in. By the time I saw the real her, I was too deep, and she knew it. That's why she kept pushing, because every time I stayed, it proved she could get away with more. That's where I was stuck in the beginning of the end. In love with someone who treated me like a spare option, apologizing for things I didn't do, paying for peace that never lasted, convincing myself that the highs were worth all the lows. Looking back, I can't believe I let it go on so long. But when you're inside it, you don't see clearly. You just survive the day and hope tomorrow is one of the good ones. I told myself I'd watch for patterns this time. If she did the same things, I'd be done. That promise lasted about a week. She came back sweet and bright, hair done, voice soft, The version of her that makes you forget every bruise you can't photograph. She showed up with takeout from my favorite place and a movie queued on her phone. "I've been a brat," she said, almost laughing like the word was cute. "Let me make it up to you." I let her in. That's how easy it is to reset the trap. A smile, a bag of food, 3 words that sound like an apology, without actually being one. The first days were smooth. She was attentive, texting good mornings, sending photos of her day. She tagged me in something and wrote my favorite person. It felt like sunlight after too many gray weeks. I started to relax. That's when she changed the rules again. She announced she was going to party with industry people. Told me I wouldn't know anyone. Told me it would be boring for me. I said, okay, have fun. At midnight, she sent a selfie with a guy's arm barely in frame and the caption networking. I didn't answer. At 1, she called and asked why I was acting weird. I said I was asleep. She said, "Already? That's so grandpa." In the morning, she accused me of being passive-aggressive. Somehow, I was on defense again. She began picking at my time. If I stayed late at work, I was married to my job. If I left early to see her, I was clingy. If I didn't answer within 10 minutes, I was ignoring her. If I answered too fast, I had no life. It sounds ridiculous when I write it out, but when it's every day, you lose track of what normal looks like. I'd catch myself rewriting a text 4 times to avoid setting off one of her alarms. Even then, she'd find a way to be offended. That was a skill. Taking neutral things and bending them until I looked guilty. Money crept back in too. She forgot her wallet twice. She asked me to cover a subscription just for this month because her card was being weird. She sent a link to a hotel we deserved, and when I didn't jump on it, she went quiet and then posted a story about men who asked for discounts on women. The next day, she was sweet again and said she found a better deal if I booked it under my name because I get points. I booked it. I told myself it wasn't a big thing. I kept telling myself that about a lot of things until they piled up into a big thing. The cracks showed in private. We were cooking one night, and I told a stupid story about messing up a presentation once. She looked at me deadpan and said, "You know you're not as impressive as you think." It wasn't teasing. It was a flat fact she dropped like a knife. I laughed it off. Later in bed, she scrolled on her phone while I stared at the ceiling, replaying the sentence. It would have been easier if she'd yelled. Yelling has edges you can brace against. This was a slow dissolve of whatever was left of my self-respect. She started setting ultimatums in nice packaging. If you really love me, you wouldn't question who I spend time with. If you trusted me, you wouldn't need labels on everything. If you were secure, you wouldn't care about money. Each one came with a smile, a kiss, a promise of later. It took me too long to realize each sentence was a demand for my silence dressed up as growth. The night that pushed something in me over wasn't dramatic. We were supposed to meet for dinner. She texted 10 minutes before. "Running late. Start without me." I waited an hour, then another. I paid for the table and left. When I got home, she was in my hallway, somehow already irritated that I wasn't there. "You're so rigid," she said, walking in like she owned the place. "You think time is a prison." I said I'd waited 2 hours. She rolled her eyes. "You could have waited 3 if you cared." She tossed her coat on a chair and asked what I had in the fridge. I heard myself say very calmly that she should leave. She blinked, surprised, then smirked like I was bluffing. I held the door. She walked past me slow, measuring how serious I was. On her way out, she said, "You'll text me first." I didn't answer. I locked the door and stood there, hands shaking, not from fear, from the weight of finally saying no. The next morning, she woke up in a new mood and sent me a picture of the sunrise with "fresh start" under it. I typed and erased 3 different replies. I put my phone down. I went to work. Around lunch, my buddy asked if I was okay. I told him more than I ever had. He said he'd watched me disappear for months and didn't know how to pull me back without making it worse. Hearing that from someone who has known me for years did something I couldn't do for myself. It made the fog lift a little. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't normal. I wasn't being too sensitive. I was being trained to ignore myself. That weekend, she flipped to nice again. She suggested we take that hotel trip, said it would reset us. I said maybe later, that I needed a few days. She went quiet and then sent a paragraph about how I was sabotaging us. I didn't reply. She followed a photo of her in a dress I'd said I liked, with a caption wasted on indecisive men. I muted her. My hand still shook, but I kept them off the keyboard. It took me a long time to accept the pattern wasn't going to change because it worked for her. Kindness when I pulled away, cruelty when I got close, demands in between. I kept waiting for a version of her who could sit in a boring afternoon without needing someone to bleed to feel alive. But boredom isn't the enemy. It's where real life lives. She didn't want that kind of life. She wanted a stage. I was a prop that talked back too much. By the end of that week, I drew a line for myself that wasn't about her at all. I stopped negotiating with insults. If she called me boring, I didn't defend my hobbies like a salesman. If she accused me of being cheap, I didn't open my banking app to prove otherwise. If she told me I was insecure, I didn't list reasons I was confident. I just said, I'm not doing this, and ended the conversation. It didn't feel powerful. It felt quiet. But in the quiet, I could finally hear myself think. That's where chat 2 ends for me. Not with a blow-up, not with revenge, just with me testing a new muscle I should have had from the start, the one that lets you leave a room where you're only welcome as a target. She didn't take the hint. A few days after I started shutting down the arguments instead of defending myself, she shifted into a new gear. First came the accidental run-ins. She popped up outside my gym wearing the hoodie I forgot at her place, said she'd been in the area and thought I'd want it back. She handed it to me like a trophy and asked if I had missed her. I said thanks and kept walking. She called after me that I was cold. Maybe I was. Cold felt safer than burned. When that didn't pull me in, she tried pity. Late-night messages about how hard her week was, how nobody understands her the way I do, how she has trouble sleeping without my breathing next to her. I set my phone face down and slept badly anyway. Morning came with a different tone. She sent a screenshot of Guy's message telling her she was amazing and wrote, "See? Some people get it." I started typing something stupid and brave, and then remembered I didn't owe any performance. I put the phone in a drawer and made eggs. She went to my friends next. One of them called and asked why I'd stopped paying my share when we went out, because she said I'd turned stingy and he thought maybe I was struggling. I laughed, then realized he was serious. I explained I'd been covering almost everything for months and had finally said no. He apologized for believing her first. I told him it wasn't on him. She speaks in headlines. I show up with footnotes. Headlines travel faster. The real test came at a birthday I couldn't skip. Mutual friends, small place, low ceiling, too many bodies, and not enough air. She arrived late, like she owned the room, and made a circle greeting everyone except me. Then she planted herself 2 feet away and started a loud story about dating emotionally unavailable men who punish you for being powerful. People glance at me the way you look at a fire alarm you're hoping won't go off. I sipped my drink and talked to the host about a broken cabinet hinge, like it was urgent. She turned up the volume, performed a laugh, and finally looked straight at me. "Do you have something to add?" she asked, sweet as sugar. I said no and meant it. She hates when there's no scene. She left early with a flourish and posted a story on the way down the stairs about escaping mediocrity. It should have stung. It mostly felt exhausting. After that night, she tried being nice again. She sent a playlist titles full of songs I'd shown her months ago like they were gifts she'd found. She asked if we could talk like adults and reset the narrative. I said email only for anything practical. She replied that I was treating her like a stranger. I stared at the screen and thought about how long it had been since I felt like anything but a target. I didn't write that. I closed the app and went for a walk. I started noticing how often I braced for impact even in silence. In the supermarket, I caught myself checking the ends of aisles like she might come swinging around with a camera already recording. On the train, I felt my shoulders creep up when my phone buzzed. I had to teach my body to stand down. Small things helped. Gym, sweat, the ache that means you're alive for a simple reason. Cooking a real meal and eating it at a table instead of over the sink. Calling my brother and talking about something other than her. It's embarrassing how long it took me to give attention to anything that wasn't her chaos. She didn't like being ignored. The messages turned sharper. I was a coward. I owed her closure. I had ruined her ability to trust. Then a pivot. She'd found someone on her level, and they were taking a trip I'd once promised and never delivered. 10 minutes after that, another message saying she missed how calm I made her. It was like watching someone spin a dial to see what station would catch me. None of it did. Not because I'm made of stone. Because I finally accepted the pattern and chose not to step on it. There was one afternoon that almost pulled me back. She called from a number I didn't know, voice soft, said she was outside and felt unsafe and could I please come down. Every instinct I have for emergencies fired at once. I looked out the window before opening the door. She was leaning against the wall, perfect hair, perfect makeup, filming herself with her front camera. I closed the curtain and sat on the floor. My hands shook from the surge of adrenaline washing out of me. 10 minutes later, she posted a video about how some men pretend to be protectors, but lock you out when you're in pain. I took a long shower and let the water run loud, so I couldn't hear my phone. I told 2 friends everything from the start without editing. Saying it in one piece made it clear I hadn't imagined any of it. They listened like they were holding a map and finally seeing how all the turns had led me here. One said I'd been living in a house where the smoke alarm went off every time I boiled water. The other said the quiet would feel wrong until it didn't. Both were right. The last time we spoke was strange because it was almost normal. She emailed about the money she still owed and said she'd send it Friday. Then she wrote a second line. You'll never find someone who understands you like I do. I stared at that sentence for a while. It used to keep me from leaving. Now it read like a warning. Being understood by someone who weaponizes your soft spots isn't intimacy. It's leverage. I wrote back, Friday works. She sent the transfer and a heart I ignored. That weekend I took the hoodie. She'd returned to a donation bin. I stood there longer than I needed to, feeling ridiculous about a piece of fabric. And then I let it go. On the way home, I passed a couple arguing by a car, voices high, hands cutting the air. I didn't feel vengeful or superior. I felt grateful my life wasn't a stage anymore. I wish I could tell you there was a final blow-up or a perfect answer. There wasn't. There was me choosing not to answer the door, not to explain myself to rumors, not to audition for the role of real man in someone else's drama. There was me go to bed and actually sleeping. There was me waking up and making coffee and tasting it without waiting for a fight to ruin it. That's where I am now. Not healed like a movie montage. Not broken like a warning post. Just a guy who finally stopped feeding the part of his life that ate everything else. I thought the calm would stick once I stopped answering. But quiet has a way of testing you. It showed me where I was still wired to react. I'd be halfway through a good day, and catch myself composing a speech in my head to deliver to nobody. I started leaving my phone in another room while I worked, not as a grand rule, just to give myself a chance to finish a thought that didn't involve her. It helped more than I expected. Whole mornings went by where I forgot to check whether she'd tried something new. That felt like getting a piece of myself back. She didn't disappear. She just got subtler. A friend sent me a screenshot of a post where she wrote about men who pretend to be calm but are actually manipulative. And a few people in the comments guessed my name without saying it. I felt the old heat in my chest, the one that says, "Defend yourself." I drafted a paragraph with dates and receipts and then deleted it. I called my friend instead and said, "Thanks for the heads up. There's power in not taking a dare. It doesn't feel heroic. It feels like refusing to juggle knives for a crowd that wants blood." I bumped into her once, for real this time, not staged. Grocery store. She was by the flowers, picking up bouquets and putting them down like she was choosing an audience. We made eye contact. For a second I felt the pull, history, habit, the way she can tilt her head and make you feel like the only person in a loud room. Then I remembered how loud our rooms always were. She smirked like she had a line prepared, then seemed to realize no one was around to clap. "You look tired," she said. I said, "I sleep fine," which was true, and kept moving. My card had boring things in it. Rice, eggs, detergent. It looked like a life I was learning how to live, and I didn't want to trade it for a scene. Work got better because I stopped carrying my personal war into every meeting. I'd been on autopilot for months, doing the minimum to avoid questions. Now I started speaking up again, not to impress anyone, just to show up. A co-worker told me I seemed different, more present. I said I'd been stuck in something and got out. He didn't ask what. It was the most respectful silence I'd had in a while. At home, I did small maintenance on my brain. I ate at a table. I took the long way back from the gym just to walk without a destination. I opened windows in the morning and let fresh air complain its way in. I found a playlist that didn't make me think of anyone. I called my brother, and we argued about a stupid show for 30 minutes like we were teenagers again. It felt ordinary, and ordinary felt rare. That's when I knew I was actually healing, not when I felt euphoric. But when I felt bored and didn't immediately reach for chaos to spice it up, of course, boredom is the one thing she can't stand. She tried again, this time with a mutual acquaintance who suddenly wanted to grab coffee and clear the air. I asked what air there was to clear. He said she felt misunderstood and thought a conversation would be healthy. I told him I wasn't a project, and I didn't need an intermediary. He said I was being harsh. Maybe I was. Boundaries sound harsh to people who benefited from you not having any. The smear thing cooled off once it stopped getting traction. There's only so many times you can tell the same story before people stop reacting. Without an audience, she pivoted back to me. She sent a single email with no greeting. "I forgive you." For a minute I couldn't breathe. Then I laughed. Forgive me for what? Leaving? Not performing? I closed the message and didn't reply. Later that night, I caught myself wanting to explain again, and I said out loud in my kitchen, "No, it's stupid," but hearing my own voice helped. It felt like picking my side in a fight that had been rigged from day one. I started dating the world again before I dated anyone in it. Coffee by myself on a bench, without scrolling. A movie alone where I didn't need to translate every scene into what it meant about my life. I forgot how good it feels to be just another person in a crowd, not the lead in a drama. A woman at the gym smiled at me. I smiled back and then went back to my set. I wasn't avoiding connection. I just didn't want to use someone as a rinse cycle. There's a difference between moving on and dragging someone onto your unfinished bridge. One evening I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was her mother. We'd barely spoken the whole time we were together. When we did, it was usually through gritted politeness. She sounded tired and asked if I could be the bigger person and talk to her daughter because she was going through a lot. I said I hoped she had support and that I couldn't be it. The mother sighed like I'd failed a test she'd set for me. I hung up and felt weirdly calm. I didn't owe a family my peace just because I used to be part of their weekly arguments by proxy. The next day, she posted a picture with a long caption about choosing herself. Good. I mean that. I also know in her language it can mean choosing whoever claps the loudest this week. That's not my problem anymore. People can evolve. People can also relabel the same behavior and call it growth. I'm too busy fixing my own house to audit someone else's self-help. I did slip once. I saw a late-night story that felt like a direct hit. Something about men who only date down so they can feel big, and my thumb hovered over the reply bar. I typed 6 sentences and deleted them all. Then I put my phone in the freezer for 5 minutes like a child because I didn't trust myself. When I took it out, the urge was gone. I made toast. I ate it standing at the counter and laughed at myself for the freezer thing. Whatever works. What surprised me most was how many normal interactions I had to relearn. Saying no to a plan without writing a novel about why. Accepting a compliment without arguing. Ending a conversation that turned mean without trying to win it. I thought those were basic settings, but I disabled them to survive. Turning them back on felt awkward, like using a limb after a cast comes off. You're grateful and clumsy at the same time. She tried one last angle that almost fooled me because it sounded reasonable. She wrote that we owed each other closure face to face, 30 minutes in public, neutral ground, to honor what we had. Old me would have grabbed at the word honor and stitched a ceremony out of it. New me read it twice and realized closure wasn't a meeting. It was a set of actions I'd already taken. Blocking, returning belongings, stopping the commentary, living in my own lane. I replied with one line, I wish you well. She sent back a thumbs up emoji that somehow felt like a slammed door. Funny how symbols can still sting. It passed. I won't pretend I don't still think about her. I do. Less like a ghost and more like a weather report. Noted, not controlling my day. Sometimes a smell will take me back, or a song or a joke she would have loved, and I let it pass through without turning it into a story. That's the biggest change. We were always writing scenes, even when we called it love. I'm done living like a script needs me be torn up all the time. So here's where I am at the end of this part. I go to bed and I sleep. I wake up and I don't check my phone before my feet hit the floor. I go whole days without rehearsing a defense. I see my friends and don't scan the room for someone else's mood. I buy boring groceries and cook decent meals and sometimes burn the garlic and open a window without making it into a metaphor. I don't need her to change for me to feel better. I needed to stop changing myself to survive her. That's what I've done. And the quiet that felt like a void at first, it's starting to feel like space. Enough room to build something that doesn't require me to disappear to keep it standing. I thought the end would feel like a cliff, but it turned out to be a path that just stopped turning back toward her. The last push came on a random morning when I made coffee and realized I hadn't checked my phone yet. No dread. No itch to see if she'd thrown a new grenade. I stood there listening to the kettle, and it hit me that peace isn't dramatic. It's just the absence of panic long enough to taste your own life. She tried one more time a message that sounded thoughtful. Let's meet for real closure. I read it twice and felt nothing but an old habit trying to wake up. Closure isn't a ceremony. It's not two people at a table trading final speeches. Closure was what I'd already done. Returning her things, blocking the loops, telling the truth to the right people, choosing not to answer bait. I wrote, I wish you well, and press send. No follow-up, no postscript. The quiet after was clean. Days started stacking like bricks. Work felt normal again because I wasn't hauling a private storm into every room. My friend said I sounded like myself, not like a narrator trapped in a story. I could sit in traffic without building a courtroom in my head. I could get home and cook and burn the toast and laugh at it without wondering how she'd spin it into a fault. I wasn't performing calm. I actually had it. I ran into a mutual friend who asked carefully if I'd ever talk to her again. I said I didn't need to hate anyone to keep my boundary. That surprised even me. I used to think anger was the only thing strong enough to hold a line. Turns out clarity is lighter and lasts longer. I don't wish her harm. I just don't want a life where my worth is a debate topic. There are moments that still tug, songs, places, the way a stranger tilts her head, and for a heartbeat I expect old chaos. I let the tug pass through. It's not a sign. It's a memory firing and cooling. Healing for me hasn't been a new person showing up or a speech that wins a room. It's been boring choices repeated until they became a different life. Answer less, breathe more, tell the truth sooner, leave when I'm being turned into a target. If there's an ending, it's this: I don't need the last word. I don't need to win the narrative. I needed my mornings back, my appetite, my ability to make plans that aren't built around someone else's volatility. I've got those now. The story doesn't end with fireworks or revenge. It ends with me washing a mug, opening a window, and realizing I can hear the day started without bracing for impact. That's enough.